Guys, it is June the 22nd, 2025, and I hope everybody's been having a wonderful day so far today. I hope everybody's been having a wonderful weekend as well. It is a smoking hot day here in South Carolina. I mean, it is hot out here right now. I don't know what the temperature is, but I would imagine it's probably about 100. It's a hot day. Yesterday was so hot that our temperature gauge that we have in the kitchen, it's got one of those like digital readers that you put outside and you put batteries in it, and it'll give you like a real reading of the outside temperature. It just said error on it. It was so hot yesterday. So it looks like today's going to be another one of those days, but if it's this hot already in June, I am not looking forward to August, because August is like, you can't even go outside this time of day. It gets that hot. I mean, the air gets so thick you can barely breathe it, especially after like a really heavy rain. I mean, you can like literally feel the air because of the humidity. But it's dry air today, and it's pretty hot, but it's not too bad. I'm out here sitting out here. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about today is something that I don't think that I've ever really discussed here on the channel. And what that is just like, what was the progression of my drinking like? Because it's not like, when I first started drinking, when I was a teenager, that I was drinking a half a gallon of vodka every single day. Because that's not what happened. As a matter of fact, I was a lightweight when I first started drinking. It did not take much for me to get drunk. As a matter of fact, like 2-3 beers and I would be pretty wasted. So when I was younger, it did not cost me much money to have a good time. And it was like that up into my 20s too. But like I said, that's what I wanted to talk about today. It's just like how my drinking progressed and how it all started, and then kind of like a timeline of how everything kind of worked out. And, to the point I got where I was at, where I ended up in the hospital. And like I said, that's what I'm going to get into today. So we'll get into that here in just a second. So like I said, I want to talk about the progression of my drinking. And, when I was a teenager, as a matter of fact, I drank for the first time when I was a kid, like really young. I remember drinking alcohol. I was younger than 10 years old. My parents were outside and they were doing yard work in the backyard. We lived on a really steep hill. When you pulled up to the front of the house, it looked like it was just one story, but it was actually two. We had a basement. So I guess it was kind of a split level home, but like I said, it looked like a one story from the road. But when you pulled behind the house, it was 2-story. And the kitchen was at the back of the house. So my parents were like way down there on the ground doing work. I knew that they weren't going to come in there and catch me. It's not like they could just walk right into the back door. There was like a big catwalk on the back of our house, and they had to walk all the way up the steps, across the catwalk, and then into the kitchen. And I could look right out the window and see them out there doing yard work in the yard, and there was just a bottle of wine sitting on the counter. I've talked about this before, but I went, poured myself a glass of wine, and cut myself up some cheese and some fruit, and stood there in the kitchen and watched my parents, and thought I was just so sophisticated. Here I am drinking wine and eating cheese. I don't know why I thought that that was the coolest thing in the world when I was younger. I have no idea. I don't even know where I got that from. It's not like my parents really drank alcohol that much. I mean, they drank, but rarely. I only saw my dad drunk like a couple of times, and the only time I really remember my dad being intoxicated was really once. He was smashed the time that I did see him like that. And I'm sure that he got drunk. I've seen him drunk way more times since I was a kid, especially when I drank with my dad. But I didn't see my dad drunk many times growing up. My mom, I saw her intoxicated just a couple of times, but it's not like my parents were drinking like that on a regular basis. So I don't even know where I got the idea of drinking the wine from, because like I said, it's not like my parents drank every day. It's not like they drank every weekend. I didn't really see it that much when I was that young. It wasn't until we moved here to South Carolina that I really got a good look at what, alcoholism or AUD really was. And that's when I was hanging out with my best friend and saw his dad drinking the way that he did. And then I started seeing more and more people drinking as I got older. But like I said, first time I ever really remember having to drink when I was, I don't know, pretty young. When I was like 5 years old, there's a picture of me standing in the yard at a family get-together. I'm not going to say where my family's from, but we were all together and I had a beer in my hand. I was like 5 years old, and it was one of those old Budweiser cans, you know, you have to, the like pull tab on the top of it. But that, like, I had been drinking beer since, you know, I don't even know how old I was. I remember my dad, you know, I would help him do yard work on the weekends. And, you know, when I was a kid, my dad always had a beer after he got done with yard work. He'd let me have a sip or two when I was a kid. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, that my dad let me sip his beer. And then, you know, it got to the point where my dad would have a couple beers in the fridge and I would just grab them. I would grab one or two here and there and drink it. You know, I'd go off into the woods and drink a beer. But, you know, it was just a sporadic thing as a kid. It's not like I was getting intoxicated all the time. It wasn't until I was a teenager, and I would say it was probably somewhere around the age of 12 that I really started to get intoxicated. And back then, you know, I had a hard time finding people to buy alcohol for me, so I had to ask somebody. My best friend's dad would buy me alcohol, especially when I turned 15 and got my driver's license and started driving around, because he couldn't drive. So I would take him to the store all the time, especially during the summertime. You know, he'd be like, "What are you doing? Can you give me a ride to the store really quick?" And I'd say, "Yeah." Take him to the store, and I'd have a couple of bucks, and I'd ask him to grab me a couple of beers. I was giving him a ride to the store. That's the least he could do for me, right? And you know, me and my best friend would go off and drink in the woods. We had thousands of acres of woods behind where we lived, and we could just disappear into the woods, make a fire, eat some little beanie weenies or some Vienna sausages or something, and sit out in the woods and drink all day long and smoke cigarettes. And that's often what we would do. You know, we get on our bicycles, you know, throw one of those little lunchbox coolers in our backpack, have a couple beers in there, maybe a sandwich, a bag of potato chips or something, and we hit the road. And we were gone. We were riding our bikes off into the woods, and like, we would just hang out in the woods on the weekends and drink, smoke, you know what, you know, mess around with broccoli, things like that, smoke cigarettes. But when I became a teenager and like started hanging around with people, things started to like get out of control really quick for me. You know, once I started drinking and I found out that I could become this whole other person when I drank, like I said, things just started to fall apart. Alcohol became a problem for me very, very fast as a teenager. But when I was a teenager, you know, I was drinking quite a bit because I've spoken about this on here before. I knew a bootleg seller. He sold alcohol, and he sold alcohol any day of the week, any time of the day. It didn't matter. I don't want to say what the guy's name was, but he was well known in the town that I live in. Everybody knew to go to his place and buy beer, because back then, too, they didn't sell beer here on Sundays. There were quite a few bootleggers that sold alcohol, and they sold it on Sunday. You go over to their place. A lot of them, it's crazy, and I'm sure the cops had to know. They just didn't do anything about it. Some of these guys had it set up to where they had like their kitchen window, and people would pull up like a drive-through. I'm not kidding you. People would pull up to these people's houses. They had a little, you know, U-shaped driveway that went around their house. I'm thinking of one right now that was on a main road. It was in a house. You pulled right up to their kitchen window. They would ask you how many beers you wanted. You told them, and it was $1 beer. So if you got 20 beers, it was $20. You give them the $20, they hand you a grocery bag with your beers or a couple grocery bags, and you pull off and you left. And that was all there was to it. Sometimes they would have like little half pints of liquor and stuff like that. But the guy that I used to go to all the time, he had half pints of liquor and he sold beer. He sold Bull Schlitz malt liquor, and he had something else. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it wasn't Milwaukee's Best. I remember the Bull Schlitz was one of the choices that we had. It might have been Budweiser was the other beer that you could buy. I used to always buy the Bull. I got the Schlitz malt liquor because it was higher ABV. And, you know, the thing that's crazy about it is even as a young guy, I was already focusing on the amount of alcohol that was present in the beer because I wanted to get the most bang for my buck. You know, as a teenager, I'm already picking up cans, bottles, things of that nature, and looking at the bottle to see, This one's 4%, and this one's 5.5. I pay $1 for each one of these beers. Which one's going to be the best choice? Well, the 5.5%, of course. Well, the Bull tasted like you know what. It was not a good tasting beer, but I didn't care because it wasn't about taste for me. It was about a feeling. It was about escape. It was about going somewhere else. It was about becoming someone else. That's what it was for me. So I didn't care about the taste. It's not like I was sitting there enjoying it anyway. When I drank beer, I slammed them. So, you know, who cares? I drank whatever I drank. I wanted to get to where I wanted to go, and the Bull Schlitz was 5.5 or whatever it was, and that's what I drank. So as a teenager, I was at the bootleg man's house like all the time, you know, a couple times a week. He knew me very, very well, knew me by first name. Every time I went in there, it was a very long conversation. I hung out for a while. I'd have a drink or two while I was just hanging out over there when I went, because I went so often, I'd become really good friends with the bootleg guy. And, you know, friends in high school started to get concerned about my drinking. Now, I did smoke more broccoli back then than anything else. I was a daily enjoyer of broccoli. From the time I woke up in the morning till the time I went to bed at night, I was enjoying my broccoli. That was like the first thing that I ever fooled around with, like big time. So it was always like my go-to. In my teenage years, I loved drinking, but it hadn't become quite as big as a problem as it was later on in life. But it was a problem already because I was already, when I smoked broccoli, I didn't get that same feeling. I didn't get that same escape, and I didn't become someone else when I smoked versus when I drank. When I drank, it was like putting on a gorilla suit or something. I could really morph into this whole different person, and I felt like nobody could see through the fakeness of who I really was deep down inside, because the person that I was portraying to be was not the person that I really was. It was somebody else. I mean, a totally made up, imaginated person that wasn't real at all. Because since I've gotten sober, my personality has changed a lot. And one of the things about it is that with me stopping drinking and my personality changing so much now, over the past couple of years, my wife and I have kind of had to relearn each other because I've been so different. Things that used to really upset me don't upset me anymore. My wife, especially in the beginning, my wife would walk around on eggshells because she would think that I would get upset about something, and I wouldn't get upset about it. I wasn't drunk and hungover all the time. My personality had just completely changed. But I'm getting way off topic. Like I said, as a teenager, I drank a lot. It was already a problem back then, but it hadn't become the problem that it was at the end yet. Now, in my teenage years, I drank and drank and drank, got into some trouble, just out hanging out with friends, just partying in cul-de-sacs and things like that, and just stupid stuff. But I started working at a really young age and was working full time. I really had a lot of goals that I wanted to meet. Now that is one thing I will say, is that I had a lot of goals, and I knew what I really wanted to do, and I really pushed for it. But the alcohol did hold me back, and it really makes me think now about back then, why some of the goals that I had set for myself I didn't quite achieve. And would I have met those goals had I have not been drinking? I'll never know the answer to that. It's just thoughts that I have every once in a while. And it's not like I get upset about it or anything, because it is what it is at this point. Those years are long gone. But I do often think to myself that, if I wasn't a drinker, how would have things worked out for me back then? I don't think my life would have been as difficult as it was, because the alcohol really jumbled things up and made my life very, very difficult, especially in my 20s, which, teenage years, I drank a lot, but then in my 20s, here I am, I'm a manager at a restaurant, very young guy. I had a kid at a really young age. My daughter was born when I was 24. And I've got a young family. I owned a house. I bought my first house when I was like 21 years old, 20 years old. So I bought my first house very young. I was trying to take care of my family. So I worked all the time. I was always at work, but when I wasn't at work, I drank. And one of the things too is that in my early 20s, I worked in the kitchen for the most part. I was just a kitchen manager. So I was always in the kitchen. I was in the back. I didn't deal with a whole lot of customers and things like that. But in my, I'd say, mid-20s, my boss came to me one day and asked me if I was ready to move up and be a general manager of the restaurant. And we're talking about a restaurant that did $4 million in sales a year. And this is back in, the early 2000s, it's many years ago. And I said, yeah, I wasn't going to turn it down. And I ended up being the youngest general manager in the company, but I didn't have very much front of the house experience. I had been a server back in, my teenage years and my early 20s. I had like 2 jobs. I would wait tables just to make extra cash. So I was familiar with speaking with people out front, but I never really was a manager out front, which is a totally different experience. When you're a manager in a restaurant out front on the floor, majority of the things that you're dealing with are problems. People are flagging you down, their steak's not cooked right, there's something wrong with their drink, their server got an attitude with them. Who knows what the problem is, but you're just dealing with complaints from customers and fixing problems all day long. And people can talk to you like really, really, really nasty sometimes. And it's one of those things that I just wasn't quite adjusted to. And when I first started dealing with a lot of customers, and especially like on Friday and Saturday nights, it was a really long shift. I'd get in there 4 in the afternoon, and we didn't even close the restaurant until 3 o'clock in the morning on the weekends. And I was getting in there and working all night long. If the time I hit the door, it was just crazy. We were already on a wait when I walk in, and it's just dealing with problems and problems and problems from the time you walked in until the time you closed the restaurant. And I would get so stressed out that I started drinking really heavy in my mid-20s. Because like I said, here I am, I'm a general manager of a restaurant. I have 4 managers under me and 80 employees, and I don't know what I'm doing. I was scared. I was afraid of failure. And I was dealing with a whole new experience, dealing with these customers out front. And it really started to weigh on me, like really heavy. And I'll never forget, that's when I started like taking shots of liquor as well. I used to go buy a bottle of tequila. I would take shots of tequila back in those days. And I would go buy, I can't remember the name of that tequila. Was it Reposado? I think it was Hornitos. I used to buy the Salsa Hornitos, and I would keep it in my shed. And every once in a while, here and there, because I drank beer every single day. And in my 20s, in my early 20s, I was drinking probably a 6-pack a day. And then in my mid-20s, it got up to a 12-pack a day. And then right around 26, 27 years old, things really started to ramp up for me. I was probably drinking a case of beer every single day, and I was drinking liquor here and there as well. Now, I drank liquor here and there throughout my 20s. Even in my teenage years, I drank liquor here and there, but it wasn't an everyday thing. It became an everyday thing in my late 20s. I was right around 30. It was either my late 20s or my early 30s. I was drinking about a case of beer every single day at this point, and I was hanging around with people all the time, all of my neighbors. Every single night, we would just hang out in our garages and drink beer. And during this period of time, too, I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. When I got home every single day, all I did was hang out in my garage and drink. If I wasn't drinking, working, I was sleeping and trying to rest. And my wife started to get frustrated with me, and she was telling me, you need to spend more time with me. And I told her no. It was all about me and what I wanted to do. I wanted to hang out with my friends. I felt like, who was she to ask me that? I've got all these friends around, that live around me. I want to hang out with these guys. I work all the time. But I was dead wrong. I was being narcissistic. All I cared about was myself, and I didn't care about anybody else. And I should have listened to my wife and went and spent more time with her and my kids. Instead, I decided to hang out with my friends and drink because that's what I cared about. It had become all about alcohol at that point. In my late 20s, early 30s, my life had revolved into just drinking, and that's all it was. In my 20s, all throughout my 20s, I was very, very involved in whitewater kayaking. And if I wasn't hanging out with friends, I was kayaking. I forgot about that. And on my days off, I would leave and go to the mountains and kayak. And then when I was home at night after I got off work, I was hanging out with buddies of mine in my garage or in their garage. I had just turned into a big POS, if you know what that means. And all I cared about was just getting drunk every single day. That's it. That's all I cared about. I had pretty much stopped kayaking every single week, in my early 30s. And around 32, especially, I think my youngest son was born when I was like 32 years old. My youngest son was born. He came as kind of a surprise to us. I was really planning on getting back into my kayaking right around that period of time, and then my youngest son was born. So I kind of moved my schedule around so that I could be home with him during the day, and then I would drop him off with my wife when she got off work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I spent a lot of time with my youngest son. I kept him every single day during the day, and then I met my wife and dropped him off. And then at nighttime, because I was home with my kid during the day and I worked right after that the rest of the day, night times was my time. And when I got off work at night in my early 30s, I was a chef at a fine dining restaurant. I had left my other job at that point. And at this point now, I was really drinking tequila quite often. I was still drinking beer, but I started making these strawberry margaritas. I was at work one day, I was at a meeting. This is my old job that I had in my 20s. This is when the liquor really started for me. I know I'm kind of bouncing around, but all this stuff's kind of coming to me. And I was at a work meeting, and I won this contest. My boss gave me a case of tequila, and I was supposed to take it back to the restaurant with me, but I left it in the back of my Jeep. And I was hanging out with a bunch of buddies of mine in my garage one night, and it just dawned on me. I had this case of tequila in the back of my Jeep, so I got it out, and we all started drinking tequila. And at that moment, something clicked, and I was like, I want to keep drinking this all the time. So I was drinking tequila on a pretty regular basis in my early 30s, and then it started becoming like an everyday thing. We had an excess of these frozen strawberries that I had in my freezer. I started making these like strawberry margaritas, and I really just started to fall in love with drinking liquor. Because I didn't have to spend all day long drinking to get to that point that I was always trying to get to. It wasn't an all-day adventure just to get drunk by 10 o'clock at night. I didn't have to start at 8 a.m. to get wasted by 9. I could start drinking and be wasted in an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I kind of said, the heck with the beer, and started just drinking the liquor. And I was on the tequila, drinking that pretty regularly. I remember I was drinking like a 750 about every single day. And then at some point it switched over from drinking the tequila to vodka. I don't remember when that happened. I would imagine it was somewhere around the age of 33, 34 years old. I started drinking vodka. I really don't remember. It might have been a little bit younger. It was about 10 years of me drinking vodka the way I was. I started buying half gallons of vodka, and I really enjoyed it with Sprite. As a matter of fact, I started drinking Grey Goose. That was the vodka that I started on, and I would mix that with like cranberry juice or Sprite, or I'd mix it with cranberry juice and Sprite together. And I really fell in love with the Grey Goose because it didn't have much flavor to it, and I could get really drunk really quick on that stuff. The only thing about it is it was really expensive. So I was drinking that, and then I switched over to something a little bit cheaper. I don't want to keep naming off all these vodkas and stuff, but I switched over to something cheaper and was drinking that every single day. And then by the end of my drinking career, I had switched over to just drinking the cheap stuff every single day. I mean, I was drinking the Burnett's, is that what it was called? It came in a plastic bottle. I think a half a gallon was like $12. I mean, it was dirt cheap. Towards the end of my drinking, I didn't care. I didn't care what I drank. could have been Pawpaw for all I cared. As long as it got me drunk. That's all I wanted to be. And it was cheap. And it came in a plastic bottle because when I woke up in the morning, my hands shook so bad that I had to start buying the plastic bottles. That's what made me switch over to the cheap liquor, because I had to start buying the plastic bottles because I kept dropping the glass ones and breaking them. And talk about freaking out. I was on the floor one day drinking up vodka with a straw that had fallen on the floor, because I wasn't going to let it go to waste. But anyway, like I said, in my early 30s, I switched over, started drinking the vodka. I would say every other day I would drink a half gallon back in those days, and in my early 30s, and it became a daily thing for me. I was drinking, or every other day. Every other day I'd go to the store and get a half gallon. That lasted for maybe a year or so, maybe a little bit less. And at some point, it switched over to me drinking a half of a gallon of vodka every single day, plus beer, plus Fireball shooters. I would walk into the liquor store, I would buy my half of a gallon, and I usually get like 4 of the big Fireball shooters. And I always had beer in the cooler in the back of my car. So I could always grab a beer. Any time of the day, didn't matter. There was just always beer in that cooler with ice on it. That was like when I was thirsty. I did not drink water. I didn't drink soda. I didn't drink juice. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't drink anything else but alcohol towards the end of my drinking career. That's it. I didn't drink anything else. I didn't drink sweet tea. I didn't drink unsweetened tea. I didn't drink anything. I didn't drink carbonated water. Nothing. I drank beer if I was thirsty, and I drank liquor when I wanted to get drunk. That's it. And I drank liquor throughout the day as well because I needed to maintain. My drinking had gotten so bad that I would start shaking if I hadn't had a shot within like an hour. My hands would shake like this. I mean, I'm not kidding, guys. And as I started to approach 40, I could start to feel my body was falling apart. I could really tell that there were some things going on. I started feeling lightheaded every single day. I would feel like I was about to pass out. Especially if I was like outside, I would get so lightheaded. I would see stars. I mean, it was at the point where there were days where I would fall over and have to catch myself. I could just tell that there was something going on with me physically. And I continued to drink a half of a gallon of vodka every single day until I was 42 years old. And I drank a half of a gallon of vodka every day until I was 42. And one day I woke up and I threw up. And when I threw up, I looked, and it was black. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. And my hangover felt way worse than any other hangover I'd ever felt before. As a matter of fact, I'd already felt this before. I'd had pancreatitis multiple times and just didn't know what it was. I'd gone to Washington, D.C. one time with my family on vacation and ended up with pancreatitis. And this morning, when I was 42, it was May the 16th, or a couple days before that, as a matter of fact. It was like May the 12th of 2022. I woke up that morning, and like I said, I threw up, and it was black. And I was confused. I didn't understand what it was. I thought it might have been the Pepsi or the Coke that I had drank earlier that morning because I felt so sick. And I kept throwing up. And every time I threw up, it was that black stuff. And it smelled really weird, like the oddest smell. I cannot explain to you what that smell was. And I kept throwing up, and I kept throwing up. And every time that I threw up, I just felt a little bit weaker. And my wife kept saying, "You need to go to the hospital." And I was like, "No, I'm okay." I wasn't telling her about the black throw up. And it wasn't until that day when she came home from work and found me laying in the bed. And I was so weak that I couldn't even get up out of the bed anymore. I couldn't get up to go throw up in the toilet anymore. I was just throwing up all over myself. It was everywhere. And that's when my wife came home and said, "You're going to the hospital." It was almost a decade of drinking half of a gallon of vodka every single day. It all started from a beer or two. Back in those days, people used to laugh at me because 2 or 3 beers got me drunk. They used to call me a lightweight. I said, well, I'm going to show them one day. I started drinking really heavy because I wanted to prove to people that I could drink just like they could. Because I felt left out. I'm not kidding. This is the truth of it, guys. I felt stupid that I couldn't drink, a 12-pack of beer without falling all over myself. Now, I enjoyed the feeling of alcohol. Don't get me wrong. I didn't just start drinking because I wanted to prove these people wrong, but I still wanted to be able to drink more than I did. And I drank all the time. And then it became, going from 2 or 3 beers. I went to a 6-pack every day. And then it went from a 6-pack every day to a 12-pack every day. And then it went from a 12-pack every day to a 12-pack plus a little bit of liquor every single day. And then it went from a 12-pack to a case plus some liquor every day. And then it went from a case of beer and a pint of liquor every day. And then it went from that case of beer and a pint to a half of a gallon of vodka every other day, and maybe a couple of shooters and a couple of beers. And then that progressed into a half of a gallon every single day. It didn't all start that way in the beginning. It gradually, slowly but surely, I worked my way up to a half of a gallon of vodka every single day until I almost lost my life. And that's how my drinking progressed. It doesn't start out, we don't start out drinking a half a gallon of vodka or a gallon of vodka or whatever every single day. It doesn't work that way. We slowly but surely get there because our tolerance starts to increase. And as our tolerance increases, so does our consumption, because we're not going to stop. We're not going to say, okay, well, I've had 3 drinks and I don't feel anything, so I guess I'm just going to stop drinking. No, I've had 3 drinks, I don't feel anything, so I'm going to have 3 more. And then when I start to feel something, I'm going to have 10 more, because that's the way this works. We can't just have 1 or 2. There's no control. Anytime we drink, everything spins out of control, and we end up in some kind of trouble, or something happens, or the hospital or something. It's just the way this works. If you've been going through this your whole life, the quitting and the relapsing and the relapses end up being bad, and all kinds of trouble happens and all this kind of stuff. There is a way out. I promise you there is. But, please speak with the doctor first, because it can be life-threatening. But please stick around here. If you're just watching this for the first time, you've never seen any of these videos before, I do these videos every single day. I almost lost my life a couple times due to my drinking. I have end-stage liver disease right now, chronic pancreatitis, type 1 diabetes. I have a lot of problems, and all my health-related issues are from my drinking. I don't know how I'm still here right now. I really don't, but I am. And, I'm going to keep making these videos every single day and talking about this and spreading education about alcohol and about how dangerous it actually really is. Because for so many years, I did not understand how dangerous alcohol truly really is. And that's why I come on here every single day and talk about this, because I want people to understand how dangerous it is and let people know, go ahead, stop now, change your life. Because what's on the other side, if you continue, I promise you it's not good. It really isn't. This does not end well if we continue to drink. It does not. Once again, please speak with the doctor first if you're thinking about quitting drinking. But if you're new here and you're watching this and you're still drinking right now, that's cool. It's totally okay. There's no judgment here on this channel. Let me know in the comments. I try to respond to as many comments as I possibly can. And like I said, I do these videos every single day because I want to help people. I want to let the sick people know that they're not alone, and that there are other people out there just like them. Because I felt so alone when I first got sick. And I want people to know that they're not alone in their addictions either. And that we can get through this, because for so many years, I thought I was the only one that drank the way that I did. I didn't think there was anybody else on this planet that woke up in the morning and started drinking liquor the way that I did. And then after starting this channel, I found out that there's a ton of other people that did it as well. That's why I come on here every day, because I want people to know they're not alone, and that there is help out there, and that other people are out there that care, and that together we can fight this. So anyway, guys, that's the progression of my drinking. That's how it started, and that's how it ended. And it ended in me almost losing my life. And the day that I got sick was the day that I stopped drinking, and I have never looked back. I went to the hospital, went through a medical detox, and I haven't touched alcohol since. But I still think about it every single day as well. When these feelings and these thoughts are going to leave, I don't know. But I'm just here, and I'm just telling the truth about what goes through my mind. So if you're new here, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to speak to you in the comments, and I hope to see you again soon. And if you're here and you've been here for a long time, thank you so much for being here as well. I love all of you guys so much. It's such a pleasure to speak to you guys in the comments every single day. Each and every single one of you are just so kind, and I really do appreciate it. And once again, guys, together we can defeat this. But this is, it's not easy. You know, it does take hard work, but it can be done. I promise you that. So anyway, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and hop off of here for today. Like I said, I just wanted to share the progression of my drinking and how it went. You know, once again, I didn't start out drinking a half of a gallon every day. That's the way it ended. And that didn't end out well for me at the end of it either. But anyway, until tomorrow, guys, I will see y'all then, and I hope that y'all have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. I love you guys so much. Until tomorrow.